Now, there's an extremely strong argument to be made that 2023 has been the best year for video games ever, and if not, it is absolutely right on up there. Even the most committed of players won't have been able to play every single great game that released this year, but despite so many hugely anticipated titles delivering on or above expectations, well, there have also been some sizable disappointments, and that's what we're here to talk about today. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 of the most disappointing AAA games of 2023. Number 10, Forspoken. Even accepting that Forspoken was a bit of a punching bag prior to its release, largely due to some of its wonkier cutscene dialogue, there was at least the hope that this action RPG could deliver some visually stunning open-world thrills courtesy of Final Fantasy XV's gorgeous luminous engine. That didn't happen at all though, did it? If aggressively generic video games are often mockingly referred to as resembling AI-authored creations, this is exactly how Forspoken feels in reality. As moderately enjoyable as the traversal and combat are, the fantastical world that's presented here has little personality of its own. The narrative is also a hackneyed hodgepodge of other superior fantasy media, and yes, the game's toe-curlingly cringeworthy dialogue did not help at all. From its brutally slow prologue onwards, Forspoken is a mega-budget tentpole that stumbled early and never managed to recover, serving up a tiresomely generic campaign that failed to invest most. And unlike some entries on this list, Forspoken's disappointment was also reflected in its sales figures, with the game flopping commercially and resulting in the closure of Studio Luminous Productions barely a month after the game's release. Ouch. Number 9, Redfall. Much like Forspoken, there was admittedly a hefty amount of pre-release skepticism regarding Redfall's ability to deliver on its open-world looter-shooter promises, especially in such a crowded and oversaturated genre. Yet, the pedigree of Arcane Studios speaks for itself, enough so that many fans had faith that they would just put out a satisfying end product. But Redfall is one of the most startlingly poor AAA efforts from any major studio this year, a soulless, unwieldy FPS without even a single interesting bone in its body. From the shoddy, gossamer-thin story, told here through ugly storyboard-style cutscenes, to the charmless characters, repetitive missions, atrocious enemy AI, and abundance of launch day bugs, it was painfully clear that Redfall was shoved out of the door while it was still barely cooking. The fallout of its release was vitriolic enough that Microsoft's Phil Spencer even apologized for the rough launch, and though Arcane promised to keep working on the game, updates have been sporadic at best. Between this and the game's concurrent Steam player count hitting single figures last month, and at some points not even enough for a 4-player team, it's safe to say that Redfall is dead and abandoned. Number 8, Forza Motorsport. Redfall was far from the only major letdown from Microsoft this year. Even something as consistently terrific as their Forza franchise hits some pretty unfortunate stumbling blocks. The new Forza Motorsport certainly touts the pin-sharp visuals and tactile car handling that fans expect, but as an overall package, well, it manages to feel both sterile and messy at the same time. Even accepting that the Forza series as a sim-based motorsport entries have always felt a bit stodgy and serious compared to the more freewheeling Forza Horizon games, there is a distinct lack of personality in this year's effort. What passes for a career mode here is a largely joyless slog, unaided by a sluggish progression system, and the driver AI absolutely stinks, and the online multiplayer's lack of drop-in racing means that you're forced to spend an obscene amount of time just sitting around waiting. Those playing on PC also have to deal with the severe performance issues, including random crashes of the non-vehicular variety, ensuring that this once reliable brand has taken a rather shocking ding to its rep. All in all, this feels less like a game made by people who love cars than at most a perfunctory corporate obligation. Number 7, Atomic Heart. Now, to be fair to Atomic Heart, it's a AAA game from a brand new studio, which appeared to be punching well above its weight, at least if the game's marketing was any indication. Trailers sold it as a visually stunning first-person shooter with a unique alt history hook, and some absolutely fantastic art direction. And while those things are all true for the game's opening, Atomic Heart's charms and superficial appeal quickly wear thin. From its obnoxious protagonist to its constantly edgy dialogue, messy story, and dull mission objectives, Atomic Heart struggles to maintain interest over its 15-hour critical path. Though clearly liberally inspired by the BioShock franchise, Atomic Heart ultimately lacks the finesse, charm, and yes, heart of that series. It's certainly not an awful game by any means, but a clumsy swing at a laudably ambitious concept, and as such becomes one of 2023's biggest gaming letdowns. Number 6, Metal Gear Solid Master Collection Volume 1. While the games contained within the first volume of Metal Gear Solid Master Collection are anything but disappointing, the manner with which they've been preserved and re-released here by Konami, well, it leaves a massively sour taste. I mean, where to begin? The lack of performance fine-tuning makes it clear above all else that Konami put this out with as close to the bare minimum effort possible. Metal Gear Solid, a game released in 1998, is still locked to 30 frames per second. That is lunacy. Beyond that, Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 are also locked to 30 frames per second on the Nintendo Switch release, and not even the new gen or PC releases include 4K support of any kind. Perhaps even worse than this is the abundance of bugs present in the launch version, and considering it'd be an incredibly basic quality of life feature, the inability to pause cutscenes in the second and third games. Why? It's evident that Konami wanted to wring some easy nostalgia-fueled cash out of a dormant IP without having to do much of anything to make it happen. Now, these games are still inherently incredible, but the way in which the publisher has chosen to take care of them, well, it is concerning to say the least. Needless to say, you probably shouldn't get your hopes up for the upcoming port of Metal Gear Solid 4. Cool. Number 5, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. Now, as this game has just dropped and is currently on fire, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start humming, and the editor is just going to put up a compilation of all of the glitches and weird stuff and just terrible things that this game has come to represent. Are you ready? Oh, how fun. Ooh, this is great. Oh, wicked. Cool. I love paying for this. Way. Yeah. Jesus Christ. Number 4, Firewall Ultra. Firewall 0 Hour was one of the most acclaimed AAA releases for the first generation of PlayStation VR, and while saddled with the original headset's woefully undercooked tech, largely delivered on its promise of immersive VR multiplayer FPS mayhem. Hopes were high then for the sequel Firewall Ultra to take full advantage of the PSVR 2's massively evolved hardware and give players a much-needed reason to splurge on Sony's currently under-supported piece of kit. But even with the PSVR 2's beefed-up specs and more intuitive design, Firewall Ultra is a deeply clunky experience which fails to make the most out of it. From the awkward controls to the strange lack of interactivity throughout, middling visuals and exhaustingly slow progression system, this is a letdown in every area. Hell, even the first game's much complained about matchmaking system, where you often spent almost as much time waiting for games as playing them, hasn't been remedied here. Simply put, it is just not good enough. Number 3, The Last of Us Part 1 PC version. Much like Metal Gear Solid Master Collection, The Last of Us Part 1 is a quite brilliant remake of Naughty Dog's masterful post-apocalyptic survival game. Or it was when it released on the PS5 last year, but the PC port though? Ho-ho! Woof. It wasn't exactly a great sign that the review codes for the port weren't given to critics until literally minutes before it hit storefronts. And so it was little surprise that The Last of Us Part 1 launched on PC in an absolutely disastrous state. Even if you can forgive how horribly optimized it was, the game was rife with bugs ranging from infuriating to hilarious, the latter pertaining mostly to the thoroughly janked out character models. For a studio with a bulletproof reputation for delivering butter-smooth experiences, it was shocking to see Naughty Dog put out something so shamelessly unfit for sale. Though the state of the game improved in the weeks and months following its March release, optimization remained a big issue, with many players still struggling to this day to hit constant frame rates on even relatively high-end hardware. Hopefully this will prompt Naughty Dog not to release The Last of Us Part 2 on PC until they can guarantee a smooth experience on day one. Number 2, Starfield, and I bet I'm going to get a lot of hate for saying that. Now, Starfield is confirmation beyond all doubt that a game can still be pretty good and still yet massively fall short of expectations. Bethesda's hugely hyped sci-fi RPG had the weight of the gaming world on its shoulders when it launched back in September, that it would throw the gauntlet down to the year's other big Game of the Year contenders and show them the what for. Yet, despite most critics generally praising Starfield, there was a consistent pang of just being quite underwhelmed, that it ultimately just fell short of being the generation-defining masterpiece that many predicted that it would be. From the game's shockingly flat opening hours to its relatively mediocre exploration potential, forgettable story and generic missions, Starfield is held up largely by its charming characters, solid gunplay and just overall vibes. In a year chock with so many outstanding games, Bethesda turning up their arguably worst AAA release to date was inevitably going to leave many feeling crestfallen. The tide of discourse may turn somewhat once modders have stuck their oar in, but for a game positioned to be Microsoft's marquee title for the foreseeable future, it is shocking how quickly it's become a distant memory to many. And number 1, Counter-Strike 2. The excitement was palpable when Valve shadow dropped Counter-Strike 2 back in September, that the legendary FPS was getting a finally long-awaited update. Yet the monkey paw curled the moment that players realized how Valve had massacred their beloved IP, given that CS2 ended up falling flat for both diehards and casuals alike. Though critical reception was largely positive, players found fault with the game's performance and lack of launch content, as well as Valve's decision to remove its predecessor Counter-Strike Global Offensive from Steam entirely. This resulted in CS2 quickly becoming Valve's worst-rated game ever on the platform, and even almost 2 months removed from its release, it's still harangued by performance and matchmaking woes. Much as fans can be fickle about the change, in this case, the prevailing feeling that Valve released this update too early feels totally on the money. While it's highly likely that CS2 will be in a much better state by mid-2024, the rough launch has saddled it with so much unnecessary reputational baggage. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 of the most disappointing AAA games of 2023. I hope that you enjoyed that, and let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on the social medias, over on X and Instagram, where it's at RetroJ, but the O is a 0. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. Even though we spoke today a lot about disappointing games, you know who is never a disappointment, my friend? You. Yes, you listening to this video. You are a massive ledge. And I wish you nothing but the best in achieving your life goals. I want you to go out there and absolutely smash it, because I believe in you and you need to believe in yourself as well. Now get out there. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye.